and welcome to GameSack. The Sega Astro City Mini was released in Japan recently to celebrate Sega's 60th anniversary, and it's the latest in the so-called mini console market. Now this one is full of arcade games with no console games at all. I imported it from Japan because, well, I love Sega games, and also I wanted to make an episode about it, and here we are. Let's start off by checking out the unit itself. The Sega Astro City Mini was released on December 17th, 2020 only in Japan. At the time of making this video, no other regions have had a release date announced. The style of the unit mimics Sega's real Astro City arcade machines that were popular in Japan. It features a 3 7/8 inch 16:9 LCD screen. It also has a micro switch joystick and buttons, all of which feel great. The coin and start buttons are not micro switch though, and that makes me want to throw this thing into the river! Sanwa buttons are nothing! I'm just kidding, nobody cares. The joystick and buttons feel really good to use during gameplay despite their tiny size. Up top you have stereo speakers, and yes, they are actually in stereo for the few games here that support it, but the effect is barely noticeable. On the back, you have the power switch, full-size HDMI jack, USB inputs for player 1 and 2, a headphone jack, and a USB port for power. This device cannot run on batteries. The screen quality here isn't bad at all. Of course, you have black borders on the side, as none of the games here are 16:9. There are a couple of wallpaper options that you can use if having black bars bothers you for some odd reason. The Sega Astro City Mini is powered by whatever chipset is hidden beneath this. Sold separately are a matching control pad and a joystick. The controller is pretty cool. It's only minimally concerned about player comfort, similar to the Sega Master System controller. But the D-pad and buttons here are pretty nice, with lots of pivot in the D-pad itself. I definitely recommend it if you like using controllers. The joystick is large and quite hefty. The stick and the buttons are of incredible quality, at least to me. I'm sure there will be purists out there who gripe about it for some reason, but not me. I can't think of any reason to complain about it, and I love using it. I also love how the joystick has high resolution and stereo-of-the-art sound to double my playing enjoyment. This verbiage is straight from the real Astro City arcade machine, just so you know. Even the controller has high-resolution graphics and stereo-of-the-art sound to double my playing enjoyment. I think that's pretty much a requirement these days. The great news about these controllers is that they can plug and play with devices like the Mister and your PC and the like. The bad news is that no other USB controller that I tried, and I tried a lot, will work with the Sega Astro City Mini. Powering the thing up brings you to the menu where you have access to the 37 games that are on here. That is a lot of games. On each game you can shuffle between a couple of different screenshots and the title to see what the game is all about. A few of the games even let you sample one of the musical selections. If you press the coin button here, you're greeted with the settings menu. Here you can select the language which will affect the menu, but not any text within the games themselves. The brightness and volume only take effect if you're playing the unit without it being hooked up with HDMI. The screen settings allow you to choose an analog display mode, which basically adds crappy scan lines to the game. And these are some really bad scan lines, so leave this option disabled. Unless of course you like things that look absolutely horrible. And then of course the previously mentioned wallpaper options. And that's it as far as the settings go. When you start a game, you're told a little bit about it and also what the buttons do, which is nice. From here, you can also start a new game or continue from a saved state. During gameplay, if you press coin and start at the same time, you can save or load your state, reset the game, or return to the main menu. You only have 2 save slots per game. I use the second slot as a general save when I'm done playing, that way my scores are saved. I then use slot 1 as a regular save state, as you'd normally use such a feature if you need it. With HDMI, you get 720p visuals just like all of the other mini consoles out there. Anyone remember 720p? How quaint. The games fill your screen vertically, so they're not integer scaled at all and there's no interpolation. That means there will always be some shimmering scrolling and uneven diagonal lines in every game, but its severity depends on which game you're playing. Playing with HDMI, I do feel a tiny bit of lag. I was able to adapt to it pretty well though, and it wasn't bad enough to be a deal breaker for me. Playing on the little screen there is the same lag, but I think it's harder to detect since everything is so tiny. Audio-wise, you'll get 2-channel stereo at 48 kHz, which is all you need. There is a little bit of audio delay, and it's usually between 3 and 5 frames, so it's better than the Genesis Mini. The system retails for 12,780 yen, which is about 120 US dollars. The controller is just under 2,800 yen, or about 26 US dollars, and the joystick is about the same price as the Astro City Mini itself. So now, of course, I've got to talk about the games. Each and every one of them, just like usual. And I'll be talking about these games in the order that they're numbered on the unit itself. So let's check out what these games are and how they run. The first game on here is Flicky. Yeah, good old Flicky. It's in every Sega compilation, but at least this is the arcade version. You're a blue bird, and your goal is to collect a yellow chick scattered throughout the level and take them to the door. Cats appear, and if they touch your chicks, they stop following you. If the cats touch you, then you die. Once you get into a groove, it can be kind of fun, but initially it feels very slippery. The next game is Sega Ninja, otherwise known as Ninja Princess. This is a vertically scrolling run and gun where you can shoot in 8 directions. You also have a button to shoot straight ahead no matter which way you run. This is more helpful than you may think. The last button is your ninja magic, which causes you to disappear briefly to avoid enemies or their projectiles. This is a fun game, but it's extremely challenging. Next, we have My Hero, and I've only ever played this on the Master System. The arcade version here is more or less the same as far as the graphics and sound go. You're strolling down the street with your girlfriend and then she gets kidnapped for no reason, so you just start attacking everyone. You don't have much reach with either your punch or your jump kick, so attacking enemies is difficult. On top of that, your hitbox is gigantic, so it's easy to get hit, and when you do, you die immediately. To top it all off, the tune that plays when you die will soon make you enraged like you've never been before. Ugh, it's like it's making fun of me! Ah! There's a part where you rescue a tied-up pink dude and he fights with you. He doesn't really seem to help much at all, he just causes visual confusion as you try to control your character. I don't recall this being in the Master System version. This is a fun one to let your friends play just to see how pissed off they get. Ah! Of course, Space Harrier is on here, why wouldn't it be? You fly around and shoot things. Notice in the lower right it says Control Reverse. If you want to change that, just hold down the C and F buttons for about a second. I recommend reverse controls if you're playing with a joystick and normal controls if you're playing with a controller. The sound emulation isn't the best here, but it's mostly good enough. A lot of times the scream doesn't happen when you get hit. This also seems to be newly emulated and not based on M2's previous emulations of the game, judging by how the rocks behave in Stage 7 here. To my knowledge, it hasn't been announced who did the emulation for the Sega Astro City Mini, but I'm confident in saying that it was not M2. Still, the emulation here is fine except for the minor sound issues. Of course, Fantasy Zone needs to be on this collection as well. Am I ever going to be able to stop talking about this game? Apparently not, and this won't be the last time either, since it's on the Switch on the Sega Ages label, so I'll have to cover it in that upcoming episode. Anyway, what can I say? It's Fantasy Zone. The cool thing here, though, is that they give you the option for normal and rapid fire. This makes the game much more fun to play. The original Wonder Boy is game number 6 on here. If you've played the first Adventure Island on the NES, then you'll be very familiar with this one as it's the same thing, only in the arcade. This version is more difficult than Adventure Island and the Master System port of this, though. There seems to be a lot more momentum here, and it can be tough to avoid enemies or other bad things when you're trying to stop from running. Overall, it's a great game. After that is Quartet 2, called so because this is the 2-player version. You can choose from any of the 4 characters, though. I love this version of the game. Basically, you just need to find the boss of each level who has the key, kill it, and then take the key to the exit. Along the way, you can grab power-ups and extended abilities. This plays great on the Astro City Mini, especially with the external joystick. You have a rapid fire mode on this one as well. In fact, a lot of games on the Astro City Mini have this option. I had a hard time putting this one down. The music is great, so that certainly helps, but it's still fun otherwise. Next is Alex Kidd with Stella, The Lost Stars. Yep, Sega tried to bring Alex Kidd to the arcade. It didn't work out so well, and this game is a huge quarter muncher. All you need to do is make it to the end of the stage, but it's super tough to avoid getting touched. When that happens, you die instantly with your irritating little scream. At the end of each stage is a boss of sorts, but you don't need to kill them, you just need to get past them to expose the Miracle Ball. The really good news is that you need to go through this game twice to beat it. You can power through it by adding 1 billion credits if you must. At least the music by Hero is really good, but not as good as his Outrun or Space Harrier scores. Here we have Alien Syndrome. This overhead run and gun has you running around rescuing hostages. As you do that, you kill aliens and grab better weapons. After you free every hostage, you fight the stage boss. This version is insanely tough, mainly because there are 0 continues. You need to beat the entire game on 1 credit. Can you? Next is Wonder Boy in Monsterland. This is such a weird game to be an arcade as it has lots of RPG and adventure overtones. It's all in Japanese, but fortunately most of the tricks I learned from the superior Master System version work here. It feels really odd to play this with a joystick. It feels a bit better with the controller, so play it that way if you can. Coming in at number 11 is Shinobi. This is a fantastic game that everyone should play. The dip settings on this one seem to be a bit high as there are a few more ninjas than normal, but it's still quite doable. Some of the sound effects lack consistency. They'll sound normal 1 minute and more quiet the next, but really it's only noticeable if you've played the actual arcade a million times like me. Also, a few instruments and a couple of the musical selections are panned left for some reason. This is wrong, especially since the actual arcade hardware this game runs on is in mono. The pictures of Marilyn Monroe have been completely removed from the beginning of Stage 2. They also changed the color of these wall ninjas to yellow. They used to be blue before, but they still didn't look like Spider-Man or anything, so I'm curious why they did that. This is still a great game though, just remember that you cannot continue at all in the final stage. Sonic Boom is the only Sonic game on here, and it's not even a Sonic game. Instead, it's an overhead shooter in Tate mode! You fly airplanes and it has all of that standard stuff as you'd expect in such a game, though it's really nothing special at all. There's a lot of shimmering in the graphics as they scroll. Next up is Altered Beast. A lot of people dislike this game, but I've always enjoyed it for what it is. Beat everyone up and grab the orbs from the white two-headed wolves. It's certainly not an outstanding game by any means, but it reminds me of being in the arcades not long before the Genesis was released. After that, we have Scramble Spirits, another Tate vertical shooter. This one is very detailed and it's hard to see because the video is only 720p. It's definitely a better game than Sonic Boom, much more interesting, but it still doesn't quite reach greatness. The music is really nice, but you won't be able to hear much of it underneath the white noise that is your weapons firing. The last Wonder Boy game on here is Wonder Boy 3 Monster Lair. This one auto-scrolls and once again you need to collect fruit to stay alive. You collect 6 different weapons, none of which last very long. The second half of each stage plays like a shooter. This game is alright, but if you can, play the TurboGrafx CD version instead. So far, we've seen a lot of games that I've already talked about on the Sega Ages releases for the PlayStation 2 and the Saturn. Sorry about that, but I've got to mention them if they're covered here. Anyway, let's check out the rest of these games. Gain Ground is game number 16. This one is in Tate mode and is very detailed. Again, since the resolution is only 720p, we can't get an even scale, so some of that detail looks jumbled. I've never really gotten hugely into this game as it's slow and honestly not very exciting for me. But it's here if you enjoy it, though slightly compromised visually. Next is Crackdown, another high-resolution game. This one looks mostly fine here though. It's designed to be played by 2 players, hence the screen that's split 3 ways. The third split is for the big map on top. Your goal is to place bombs at the places that the enemy has marked for you, as this will ensure the destruction of their hideout. Despite how simple it is, I enjoyed this one quite a bit, and I'm glad to have finally gotten around to playing the arcade version here. Then there's Golden Axe. This beat 'em up is of course an absolute classic. The Genesis version is great, but this is better in every single way except overall length. Yeah, it's short, but I'm always down to play through this game. They even managed to keep all of the screams from First Blood in here. The difficulty is set perhaps a bit too easy, but I guess that doesn't matter much when you have unlimited continues. Maybe try restricting your credits with this one. Here's Cyberpolice E Swat. I always enjoyed this one in the arcades. I was surprised that the Genesis version was pretty much a completely different game. You start out as a lowly human being shooting the bad guys. It kinda plays like Revenge of Shinobi with limited ammo and you need to collect more as you go, except in this game you can shoot up. Eventually, you get promoted to Robocop. Here, you have better weapons and your armor breaks away as you take damage. This one's kinda goofy in a lot of ways, but it still reminds me of fun times in the arcade. Shadow Dancer is another one that's almost completely different from its home version. This game is more sloppy in the arcade with cluttered artwork that looks rather messy. The goofy animations don't help much either. It's super tough as I don't feel the level design is something that got much attention. Even the sound and music are lacking. With all that said, it's still fun to play this one just to see how different it is. You can't just plow through this one by adding credits as you start at the beginning of a round if you die. Like I said, not as good as the Genesis version, but I'm still glad it's here. Alien Storm comes in at game 21. I've only ever played the Genesis version of this one until right now. I guess you could say it's a beat 'em up, a really weird beat 'em up with a few different modes like first-person shooting segments. Overall, it's a bit better than the Genesis version in most ways, and it's definitely worth playing through. I really like the colors in this one, and there are a ton of voices, some of which I can even understand.
You're dosed, dude.
Then there's Columns. I guess this needs to be in every Sega collection too. Nothing special here. Bonanza Brothers is here as well. This one looks pretty clean aside from the shimmering that you'll notice occasionally. I don't like being forced to play in split screen mode. However, it seems the more and more I play this game, the more I enjoy it. I mean, not that I love it or anything. Columns 2 is here as well. Oh goody. I like this one less than the original as the game style is flash columns. Thunder Force AC is an odd one to find on here. This is basically a slightly upgraded version of Thunder Force 3 on the Genesis. Well, mostly upgraded. The music is now in mono because I guess that's what arcade goers prefer, I don't know. This is also the game that the Super Nintendo title Thunder Spirits is based on. It plays well here and it sounds great too. I'm just glad a horizontal shooter is in this collection. I much prefer horizontal shooters to vertical ones as they somehow seem less generic. Game number 26 is Radmobile, which is purported to be Sega's first 32-bit game ever. You race across the country with a very strict time limit. Sometimes you'll need to turn on your headlights in dark areas, or turn on your wipers when it's raining. There's so much immersion that you might think you're really driving. I had a hard time controlling this with the joystick, and I think the next time I try this, I'll use the controller instead, as that may help a tiny bit. Also, this game was Sonic the Hedgehog's very first appearance in any video game ever, just in case you weren't aware of that little bit of trivia. Also on here is the arcade version of the first Cotton game. Awesome, another horizontal shooter. Here, you play as a witch with a Halloween-style setting, which is pretty awesome. This is a weird game for sure, and I'm not the hugest Cotton fan, but I can appreciate it for what it is, I guess. You gotta collect all these gems that bounce around the screen, and they add to your special weapons. I think that's how this game works anyway. The graphics and the music are great, and they're the main reasons to play this one. The game only lets you continue from where you died once. After that, it's back to the beginning of the stage for you. Arabian Fight is even on here. This is a super awkward beat 'em up with characters that are way too big for their own good. The gameplay is haphazard at best. Stuff is just all over the place and it's often difficult to tell even what's going on. You'll even find yourself off screen from time to time. At least the emulation here is better than MAME though. If you recall, I talked about this game in a Left in the Arcades episode and the sky here was black. I said that it probably should be blue. And look, it is! This is definitely worth trying out once at the minimum, and at least you'll be getting a properly emulated experience here. Golden Axe: The Revenge of Death Adder is the outstanding sequel to the original game. This title is finally making its way home in a few different ways, and it's good to see it on here. I have the actual arcade board, so yeah, I noticed some inaccuracies like the broken music here followed by some way too quiet sounds. But hey, at least it has sound. If you've been watching the show for a while, you know my arcade board no longer makes any sound at all. I love frying the enemies to death with my magic. I'm not a big fan of the other 3 characters in the game, so I only use the generic guy, but that's just me. There are a few branching paths here and there, but keep in mind that this is the Japanese version. That means the paths you skip over never need to be played through. On the US version, you need to play through every stage to beat the game. This is one of a few big reasons to pick up a Sega Astro City Mini thingy. Of course, Puyo Puyo is on here. I certainly like this one better than Columns. Match 4 of the same color jelly blobs in any configuration to make them disappear. And yeah, that's right, this is the arcade version of Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine. Number 31 is Dark Edge, a one-on-one fighting game I've never played until now. This is an awful 3D fighting game that predates Virtua Fighter by many months. So I guess that technically this is the first 3D fighting game ever, despite being comprised of 2D sprites. The control is just awful. You have strong and weak punches and kicks as well as a jump button. The camera angle makes it difficult to fight much of the time, and honestly it confuses me. You can do some special moves, but do the directions that you need to input change if the enemy is in front of you instead of to your right, for example? I really can't tell. The graphics are pretty bad and very pixelated, and the music is just okay. This isn't much fun to play at all, but it is interesting that it exists. For that reason, I'm glad it's on here to satiate my curiosity, even though I didn't know it existed before seeing it here. Hdmi R is basically a bunch of minigames for you to play. Mostly of the brain teaser variety, but it can still be fun. Virtua Fighter is another big reason to desire a Sega Astro City Mini. This is a fun game and it looks great here, nice and crisp for the most part. What's really interesting is that the polygons seem to be rendered out in full 720p, which is quite a bit higher resolution than the arcade's 480p. The game has never looked this sharp, at least officially, and it plays mostly fine as well, but there are some emulation issues. Mostly, it runs at the same frame rate as the original arcade as you play, which is about 29 or so frames per second. However, when a match is finished, it can drop a ton of frames on the replay animations. It doesn't look great at all, and I guess the hardware of the Astro City Mini isn't quite up to the task. Fortunately, this issue doesn't seem to affect the actual gameplay. Interestingly, this problem doesn't seem to happen at all when you play it on the Astro City Mini's own screen. Obviously, it's rendering at a lower resolution when you're playing it this way, so you're really only going to run into this issue if you're using the HDMI output. Another issue is that sometimes the sound is slightly distorted from it being too loud on the preamp level. Turning it down on your end won't change this. They'd have to lower the volume in the software. It could also be that the Astro City Mini hardware is just strained trying to run this all as well. I'm not entirely sure. Still, it's pretty awesome that this game is on here. Next is Stack Columns. Yay, another Columns game. Does the world really enjoy Columns as much as Sega thinks we do? I don't like it. Then there is Ichidan R. This is the sequel to Hdmi R with more brain teaser type minigames. After this is Puyo Puyo 2. This one has the ability to rotate clockwise or counterclockwise with different buttons. I don't hate this one, and I did okay with it. I just don't like the blank blobs that are constantly falling in my play area. last game on here is called Tori Kun. This is clearly not an arcade game. It plays like Sega's old arcade game called Head On, except that you can change directions. There's no sound at all here. The description for this one only says, the one that is already in there. Okay. Oh well, I'd still rather play this than Columns. There you go, that's the Sega Astro City Mini. Overall, I really like it. Now, it's not perfect, but come on, I wasn't really expecting it to be, was anyone? But I've got to say that it is my favorite mini system so far. Now, I doubt this will ever get a release outside of Japan, but hey, never say never. And if they do, I wonder if they'll change up the lineup of games at all. Who's to say? Anyway, what do you guys think of the Astro City Mini? Let me know, and in the meantime, thank you for watching GameSag. Are you tired of using controllers with low-resolution graphics, mono-of-the-art sound, and regular playing enjoyment? I hate controllers that have low-resolution graphics, but mono-of-the-art sound too, and just regular playing enjoyment? Well, step up to the Sega Astro City Pad! High-resolution graphics and stereo-of-the-art sound double your playing enjoyment! High-resolution graphics! Stereo-of-the-art sound! Not only am I having fun, but I'm having exactly twice the amount of fun. Not 199%, not 201%, but 200% the amount of fun as I was before. It can be measured. Sega Astro City!